Time for Wednesday's hour number 2 on hashtag Daily K with your host, Peter Bint. Korean dramas, movies and even lyrics. Why is the world paying attention to Korean stories?
From classics to modern masterpieces, time to dig deep into the charms of Korean literature.
Roll up and check it out.
With Paul.
What a happy, jolly song that we have on for you to bring Paul Matthews into the studio, and he has put me in the worst mood. Filthy, I would say,
Why
Paul.
are you in a bad mood? Hello, everyone, by the way.
Disgraceful.
Hello.
For the eagle-eyed listener out there watching the video stream.
No, that would be an eagle-eyed viewer.
All right.
You can't be an eagle-eyed listener. You're an eagle-eyed viewer.
All right. Eagle-eared listeners as well. Maybe you can hear the difference in today after Paul came into the studio. Spot what is different. Paul has taken the brand new headphones, which only came yesterday, and I let Minji put them on. Well, to be honest, I didn't know they were there until Minji had put them on.
Yeah.
And then I saw them this morning over in the guest seat, and I took them for myself, which is reasonable because no one else is here in hour number 1.
What?
You traipse in and you reclaim them. And now I'm wearing the old earphones, the headphones.
It's such a good day.
Does
I'm
it feel
so
comfortable?
Happy. Oh, these headphones are so good.
There's no kinks in the wire.
Oh, the wire is beautifully curled. I'll show that off for the eagle-eyed viewers.
Okay, and they've got a bit of padding on the top.
Don't
so I
hit
can
me.
Bang you on the head and it doesn't hurt, does it? Thanks.
Yeah.
Thanks for that, Paul. Ruined hour number 2 for me.
Such a good mood. Such a good mood today.
We do have lots of people on board who are randomly talking about this, that and the other. Jennifer Wood says he's got pork, rice and corn tonight. Tomorrow's either chicken pot pie casserole or pizza. I'm not sure yet.
I'll take one of each, please.
Yeah, me too. Send it over.
And apologies for not being on the chat this week. I was accosted by Denny.
Oh.
I was in his rest stop for the first hour.
I thought you were banned from the YouTube chat. I've been trying to get that decision made by the higher powers, but still you're allowed on it?
I'm allowed on it. I've got
We'll
a few sock puppets, a few pseudonyms I use.
We will see about it. Leon says Paul has new headphones. Woohoo! So can we please request his favourite song, which the title should not be mentioned, so that Paul can test out the audio quality?
For some reason, I'm thinking of a yellow fruit.
Have you had a good week, Paul?
I've had a very good week. I've had a lovely week, a delightful week.
Anything interesting happen in the life of Paul Matthews?
Oh,
how was the whole event of your trousers?
You want to bring this up on air?
Yeah,
Okay.
well, didn't we talk about it a little bit?
No, we didn't.
Oh, sorry.
We talked about
Paul
that off air.
Had a hole in his jeans
Last week, I think it. No, was it? I don't remember when it was.
I think it was last Wednesday.
It was last.
Yeah,
was
and
it
you
Wednesday?
tweeted about it.
Was it Wednesday? No, because I
Yeah.
didn't see you with the hole in my trousers.
Oh, really?
No, it was a different day.
I thought I knew about it. I didn't look, but I'm sure you told me. And then you tweeted about it later. So I was like, oh, he's going public with this.
No, it was on Monday. It was on Monday. I had a look. Basically, what happened was I got dressed, I put on my trousers as normal and the rest of my clothes, and went out the house. And I got in a taxi. Mm-hmm. And on my way in the taxi, I felt a breeze where there shouldn't have been one.
There's air conditioning.
And I checked, and there was a rather large hole.
Oh dear.
In the centre of a certain area.
Wow.
And so I had to spend the entire day with my legs crossed.
Okay, can we link that into manhwa, hashtag comic?
I was reading a manhwa as I was wearing my trousers with a hole.
You have been a comic book fan since you were young, right?
I love comic books, yes.
Beano and whatnot.
No, I was a dandy boy, thank you very much.
Sorry,
Yeah.
You are still
dandy. And then Oink, and then 2000 AD. I love comics. I love Korean comics. There's not enough of them translated into English, I think. There's quite a lot, but not enough.
Okay.
But yeah, there's something about comics that just speaks to me on a different level. Mm-hmm. And I find it a little sad that we can't really feature comics on this show, even though there are some really great ones translated into English, because, well, you know, the image doesn't work on radio.
Well,
as the eagle-eyed listeners would have noticed.
I want to say, liar, liar, pants on fire, or should I say, pants with a hole on fire. January 11th, last Wednesday, breaking news, I have discovered a rather large hole in my trousers. Unless it happened on Monday and Wednesday, and then I'm going to be concerned for your trousers in your wardrobe. You may be sabotaging them. This proves it was Wednesday. What do you have to say about that, Mr. Matthews?
Fake news.
Guilty
Fake news.
as charged.
Comics. We're talking about comics today. Manhwa, what a fantastic phrase to use. I love them. They're great.
Are we talking about a comic today?
No, of course we're not talking about a comic.
Okay.
Talking about a short story today. A short story in a fantastic collection. It's a collection called Sweet Potato. Mm-hmm. It's by Kim Tong-in. It's translated by Grace Jung. And it's a really beautiful, brilliant collection of Kim's short stories, sort of spanning his career as a writer, that takes us back to the painful past of Korea in the 20th century, the early 20th century. And we're going to look at the titular story, which is Sweet Potato.
Or 감자 in Korean, which nowadays means potato.
Part 3, Peter, part 3.
Okie dokie. I did not look ahead. And if you want to spell out his name in English, it is actually spelt the old kind of Romanized way, right? With a T instead of a D for Dong.
Though if you do look him up with a D, you'll find lots of information about Kim Tong-in as well as Kim Tong-in. They're the same person, it's just spelt differently.
One person. Okie dokie. Have we done Kim Tong or Kim Dong-in at all?
No, we've not. It's the first time featuring him, and I think it's timely for us to look at him. Mm-hmm. He was born in Pyongyang in 1900. He came from quite a wealthy family and had a good upbringing. His family were rich enough to send him to Japan to study.
Wow.
He studied in Tokyo at the Meiji Academy and then the Kawabata School of Fine Arts.
Yeah, it must be said, I don't know if we've ever pointed this out, but we often talk about some authors born in this time who went to study in Japan. And I think some of our listeners might be confused, and I was when I first came to Korea. I was like, weren't you under occupation from Japan? How did that work? But if you were of a certain class, you could afford to do that and actually benefit from maybe a slightly more advanced Japanese education.
Yes, yeah, I wouldn't use the word advanced, Peter. Just more privileged,
yes.
I would say. Mm-hmm. The thing is, when you're occupied by another country, that means, well, you're basically part of that country, which means you are free to travel. And many Koreans did go and work or study in Japan. Mm-hmm. Whether they wanted to, whether they liked to or not is another question. Yes. But yes, that happened a lot. Okay. But he didn't really study. He dropped out. Oh. He wanted to be a writer. He set up a journal with a few of his peers called Changjo, Creation, in 1919. And what was interesting is there were sort of two sides to literature, Korean literature at that time. One was national literature, which was literature sort of helping the Korean people and all about freedom fighting and democracy. Yeah. And then there was Kim's group, who were more interested in art for art's sake. Oh. You know, we write stories because we want to write stories. Mm. And so the featured story today was written in 1925. It was considered to be a bit of a breakthrough in terms of realism in Korean fiction. Nice. He didn't have a great second half of his life. He wasted his inheritance, basically. Uh-oh. And then he got into drugs, and he got into debt, and he started, instead of writing art, he started writing popular serials just to make ends meet. But he did survive past liberation. He passed away in 1951, and we have the Dong-in Literary Award is named after him, Kim Tong-in.
Oh, that we've talked about a few times.
Yes. And so some of his stories are absolutely amazing. This collection, translated by Grace Jung, is brilliant, and it gives you sort of a taster of why he is so important to Korean literature.
Lovely. Going way back when today. And Grace Jung, a little bit of info on her.
It's the first time featuring her as well. Born in 1987 in Busan, but she immigrated with a family to New York in 1992. Studied English literature and then went on to do a PhD in film and TV studies at UCLA. She does a lot. She has many strings to her bow. Oh. She's an academic. She's a K-drama podcast host.
Nice.
She's a film director, film producer, stand-up comic, author, and translator.
Wow. That is a lot.
She's doing so much. She's even an artist as well. I forgot to mention that. But yes, so this is the first time featuring her translated work. This is her first published collection. She's had a translation of another story, one by Lee Chong-jun, published elsewhere. But it's great to have her featured on the show.
Fabulous. Okay, let's get into this first reading of the short story, Sweet Potato, starting at the beginning.
Oh, we are.
Yeah, let's take it away.
Fighting adultery, murder, begging, imprisonment. The slums outside of the Chilsung Gate were the point of origin for all of life's tragedies and conflicts. Pongyo and her husband were farmers, the second in class ranking: scholar, farmer, artisan and tradesman. Pongyo was poor but raised in a household that upheld principles. The strict rules of the Sonbi were left behind once the family fell into the rank of farmer, but some level of discipline, order and intelligence lingered. Pongyo, who grew up in that house, still enjoyed the creek, where she played naked with the other girls and wore pants as she casually walked around her neighborhood. But in her heart, she still held on to a vague sense of discipline and morals. The year she turned 14, she was married off to a man in her neighborhood for 81. Her new husband, an old man is more like it, was 20 years older than she. In his father's generation, they were pretty well off as farmers, owning several patches of land. But as time passed, one or two began to disappear. The 81 that he spent to purchase Pongyo was the last of his assets. He was an incredibly lazy man. If a patch of land was given to him through an elder's connection, he would simply scatter the seeds and never tend to them. By the time autumn came, he would simply say, "The crops were no good this year," and bring nothing to the landowner. He'd keep the harvest all to himself, and so he could never maintain one field for more than a couple of years. After several years of this, he lost the goodwill of everyone in town. When Pongyo first got married, she was able to get by thanks to the help of her father during the first 3 or 4 years. But even he, who had a Sonbi background, began to grow bitter at the sight of his son-in-law. The couple even lost credibility at Pongyo's own home. They had no choice but to go to Pyongyang as laborers. But for the lazy husband, laboring certainly was not a good fit. He would take his A-frame to the Ryongmang pavilion to stare at the Taedong River all day. So how on earth could he make any wages? After 3 or 4 months of laboring, they found some luck and entered the servants' quarters of some home. But they couldn't last there either, and eventually got kicked out. Pongyo worked hard at the house, but her husband's laziness could not be helped. Pongyo glared her husband down every day, but his habits could not be mended.
Welcome to Arirang Radio.
If you are in Jeju,
88.7 in Jeju City.
88.1 in Seogwipo City.
101.9 in the Daejeong area.
Arirang Radio.
Interesting reading, and Leon's come in saying sweet potato, I wonder if this is linked as well, is or was a staple dish for many civilians during the Japanese occupation here in Singapore.
Yes.
And also, could someone please explain the term sonbi a little more?
A Sonbi is like a scholar, sort of a gentleman who studies well.
So
It's
someone who's a bit more like upper class.
well,
than
not
a regular.
not nobility,
Okay.
but certainly above a farmer.
Okay, I
Yes.
hope that clears things up for you. It does for me as well. Thank you, Leon, for asking.
And Leon, I think sweet potatoes and potatoes are a staple often of people who don't have much at all because they grow very well in poor conditions.
Yeah.
I talked to a number of North Korean defectors here in South Korea and talked to them about what they ate. And they didn't talk about eating rice or noodles a lot of the time. Their staple was potatoes or sweet potatoes.
Oh, interesting.
Yeah.
Yeah, because a lot of Koreans, when they're on a diet now, they'll eat a lot of sweet potatoes and it can be delicious.
Oh,
but
they are.
You might take it for granted.
Hang
here.
on, quick vote.
Yeah.
What's better? What's tastier, a potato or a sweet potato?
Just on its own, hands down a sweet potato.
No way.
The hint is in the title, sweet
No
potato
way. I'm going
versus just potato.
Peter,
Yeah.
roast potato.
By itself?
Yeah.
No. So you've not got any goose fat or anything like that. You've just roasted a potato with nothing. It's gone all dry.
That's a baked potato.
Yeah.
It's not a roast. Yeah,
Roasted
baked potato.
Cheating. No beans, no tuna, nothing.
Little bit of butter.
No butter. You're just eating the skin for flavour.
I like the skin of a
It
baked
is
potato.
nice and crispy, you're right.
Yeah.
Someone told me as well, going on a complete tangent, well, not complete, because the title is Kumja, sweet potato, that you should eat the skin of a sweet potato. And it can actually taste quite delicious if you like roast it in an oven, just like a baked potato. Interesting.
Well, I have to say I've only ever eaten peeled sweet potatoes, so I can't testify to that.
Do you like sweet potatoes?
I find them too sweet.
Oh, really?
I think they're nice. I understand why people like them, but
Okay.
when I'm looking for a root vegetable, sweetness is not the main category I'm going for.
Oh, wow. I love the kind of mul koguma, the ones that are really like dripping in sweetness, and they are proper sweet. Yeah, they like melt your teeth almost.
I don't want anything to melt my teeth, Peter.
On a Wednesday
disaster.
morning. That's exactly what I'm looking for. You got a couple of messages.
I do. Talking about the Sunbi and talking about classes, Tropic Girl's asking, scholar, farmer, artisan and tradesman were considered second class? Well, compared to nobility, yes. The nobles are the first class,
Yeah.
and then everyone is beneath them. And Tigrishi, you're talking about the husband. His laziness could be helped. He could force himself to work, but he didn't care about anyone except himself. Spot on, Tigrish. He's not the nicest of men, as you're about to find out as we go through this story.
Oh, no, it gets worse. Because,
Well, it gets lazier.
okay, he's doing nothing.
Nothing.
He's not getting off his bottom at all. What are they going to do? Getting kicked out of each job? She's trying her best.
She's
it
trying her
seems.
best, but he's just causing problems and problems and problems. And so they get kicked out again and again. And so they end up in this ghetto outside the Chilsung Gate in Pyongyang. And this is where the worst of the worst live.
Oh, no.
The beggars, the thieves, and that kind of person. She tries to beg. She's thinking, I've got to make money somehow. The problem is, she's too young and she looks too good. She's in her prime. And so the citizens of the city are like, why are you begging? Look at you.
Yeah.
And she even has to pretend that her husband is dying.
Oh, no.
And even then they won't give her money. So they, as a couple, are basically the poorest in the ghetto.
Oh, the poorest of the poor.
Yeah. And she looks around and she sees other women of similar ages and they're making money.
Okay.
But they're going to visit men's houses.
Aha.
But because of her upbringing, she can't stoop that low. She's
Good.
like, I cannot do that.
Okay.
So they remain poor. And then something changes. The city's government have these pine groves that are infested with moth larvae. And they're hiring women from the ghetto to go and clean out the larvae.
That's good.
And only 50 are chosen, but she's one of them.
Yes.
And so she goes, she works hard, she's climbing trees, she's catching the larvae with tongs, she's making 32 chun a day. Not a lot of money, but it's money. But after a week or so, she notices something odd is going on with some of the women.
Oh, let's find out.
About 10 or so young women didn't work, but sat around laughing and fooling around on the ground. Not only that, but their wages were 8 chun more than the actual workers. There was just one supervisor, and he not only allowed them to carry on, but would occasionally join in on the fun. It was lunch hour, one day at work. Bongnyo climbed down to eat her lunch before getting back up on the ladder to work when the supervisor called to her. Bongne! Hey, Bongne! What is it? Bongnyo set down her insecticide and tongs and headed over to him. Come here for a minute. She went over to him without a word. Hey, let's go back there for a second. For what? Well, just go. Okay, Hyungnim. She turned and called to the women. Hyungnim, let's go. No thanks, dear. The two of you can enjoy yourselves. What fun would there be for me? Bongnyo's face turned bright red as she turned and followed the supervisor. Let's go! The supervisor walked ahead and Bongnyo followed with her head lowered. Lucky you, Bongne! She could hear the sounds of the women teasing behind her. This made her face turn even brighter. From that day forth, Bongnyo became one of those women who did not work, but collected a higher wage. Bongnyo's outlook on life and morals also changed.
I thought you said she had those morals and she's not doing that kind of funny business, but
She wasn't, and
she's changed.
then she was.
Is she happy to be doing that? Like not having to work and making more money?
Yes. I mean, it was unthinkable.
Uh-huh.
But now desperate times have called for desperate measures, and she's making money. She doesn't really have to work, and it's a lot easier than begging.
Interesting.
And she gains confidence.
Oh.
And she starts to sort of love herself a bit more again. She starts to wear makeup.
Okay.
She's feeling better and better. And they're doing better financially. And she's growing prettier by the day. And husband is also happy. He doesn't have to do anything.
Just taking the money.
Yeah. So a year goes by like this, and she starts accosting beggars on the street. And she comes up to me and says, "So how much have you earned today? You know, so you're going to loan me some money in return for it?"
Oh.
Yeah. And then autumn comes. And at this time of year, the women of the ghetto, what they'll do is they sneak into the local Chinese owners' gardens to steal sweet potatoes and cabbages.
Uh-oh.
Bong Yo tries her hand, and she manages to grab a few sweet potatoes, but she's caught by Mr. Wang, who's the owner of this garden. And he takes her home with him, and she makes some money. Other women from the ghetto are only bringing home cabbages. She's got a whole 3-1.
Wow.
A lot of money.
Okay.
And Mr. Wang becomes a regular visitor to the house.
Does her husband know?
Yes.
Okay.
He greets him and then he makes himself absent.
Wow.
But now she can stop worrying about beggars. They've become one of the richest families in the ghetto and everything's good.
Okay.
But then when winter passes, things start to change. And Mr. Wang has decided to buy himself a young girl as a wife.
Uh-oh.
And Bong Yo is like, no, I'm not jealous. And yet at the same time, she's plotting revenge.
So she's more than like happy to be in these arrangements, it seems.
Yeah, but also she feels some sort of ownership over Mr. Wang. And so the day the bride arrives, the guests fill up Wang's house
Yep.
and she makes her move. She enters, her face all powdered white. She glares at the bride-to-be and she grabs Wang's arm and smiles and says,
We'll find out in our third and final reading. This has taken a twist I did not expect.
I'm in London.
I'm in Australia.
Tokyo.
The Philippines.
Finland, Indonesia,
New York.
Arirang Radio.
Now live in Seoul.
come, let's go to my house. Wang couldn't say a word. His eyes lacked focus. Bong Yo gave Wang another shake. Come now, let's go. We have something to tend to tonight. I can't go. What tending do you have in the middle of the night? There's still tending. The strange smile from Bong Yo's lips suddenly vanished. You trifling thing. Bong Yo raised her foot and kicked the bride's ornamented head. Come on, let's go, let's go. Wang began to shake. He pushed aside Bong Yo's hand. Bong Yo collapsed, but she got right back up. When she stood, she had a sickle in her hand. Die, you! How dare you hit me, you! I'm dying! She cried out while brandishing the sickle. There outside the Chilsung Gate, where Wang's home stood in isolation, a violent crime took place. But that scene soon quelled. The sickle that Bong Yo had been wielding suddenly found its way into Wang's hand. Blood spewed from Bong Yo's throat, and she keeled over onto the ground. Bong Yo's body was left unburied for over 3 days. Wang went to see Bong Yo's husband several times. Bong Yo's husband went to see Wang several times as well. The two had negotiated something between themselves. 3 days passed. In the middle of the night, Bong Yo's body was transferred from Wang's house to the husband's house. 3 people sat around the body. One was Bong Yo's husband, the other was Wang, and the last was a herbal medic. Wang reached for his purse, took out 3 bills of 10 won, and handed them to Bong Yo's husband. 2 of those bills went to the herbal medic. 2 days later, the medic declared that Bong Yo had died of cerebral hemorrhage. and sent the body to a public burial ground.
That took a very extreme twist in that third and final reading, Paul. I wasn't ready for that. I'm not happy with that ending as well.
Well, I'm sorry, but you have to complain to the author, who you can't complain to because he's passed away in 1951.
Goodness gracious, that got extreme very, very quickly, didn't it? Lots of interesting reactions from our listeners, lots of messages as well. Jennifer Wood saying what I am thinking. Plot twist, not expecting that one. Leon saying, I got the ending. Why always so tragic? A woman's fate back in those days. And Tigrish saying 3 days of just sitting around. No one cares for the poor enough to investigate a murder as well.
No. And Sarah asking, is a sickle a knife? It's a kind of. It's a curved knife, usually used for cutting when you're harvesting.
Isn't it in the top of the Chinese flag? Maybe in the
Yes,
top
that's
corner?
a kind of sickle,
There
yes.
you go.
Or the hammer. Is it a hammer and sickle for the Russian flag?
I
The old
think it
Soviet
was,
Union
yeah.
flag? Yes, anyway, it's a knife that's used by farmers.
Okie dokie. And this is where it ends.
Yeah, this is the end of Sweet Potato, and it's a tragedy. But she had such a terrible life, and a life that started with dreams of something better, but ends in brutality and tragedy. And it captures what life was like for so many at that time under Japanese occupation. And the imagery that he creates is so visceral. And you can see how, if you were in her position, how you might be the one to take step after step after step to your tragic destiny.
Yeah.
And the husband. There are words I could use, but I won't use on the radio.
Good for nothing. In the end, he just takes the money
Yeah.
from Mr. Wang.
Well, after all, he didn't love her, did he?
No.
He loves having the luxury of lying about. Her name, we should probably talk about, Boknyo, is ironic because Bok means luck and Nyo means girl, so lucky girl.
Oh, I see.
But she has no luck, no
at all.
luck at all. And there's also something we need to talk about in terms of the story. As I mentioned in part 1, Peter, part 3.
I didn't spoil it, did I?
Yes. So in Korean, it's called kamja. And some English translations of the story have it as potato.
Yeah.
But here it's sweet potato.
Yeah.
And we have to look at the very confusing linguistic history of the two vegetables.
Interesting, because, in modern day Korea, I think young kids, they just know, kamja potato, koguma, sweet potato,
Yeah.
that's it.
But when sweet potatoes first came to Korea, they were called kamjo.
Very similar to kamja.
Yeah.
Okay.
And then this term kamjo was used for both sweet potatoes and potatoes.
Ah.
And then goguma, which actually comes from the Japanese, became the word used for sweet potatoes.
Interesting.
And kamja became the word for potatoes, unless you go to Jeju, where it's jisu.
Completely different.
Yeah.
Just, and in Korea, we've really tried to purge a lot of Japanese-derived words.
We have,
right?
but goguma has escaped.
That's interesting, isn't it? I think maybe it's not too far-fetched to say there might, in the future, be a movement, kamja, again, kamja. Who knows? Because some people are very strict about that. Some broadcasters as well.
Oh, absolutely. Yeah, Arirang, I think, has always been quite careful about the language that we use. We have a guide in terms of language that we use on air.
Absolutely.
Which is right, because I think it's much better to use the Korean term than use a foreign term, where
Absolutely.
possible.
Yeah.
Yeah. So this is really interesting. So that the whole point is that back in the day, potatoes were potatoes. And the point is she was starving and she needed them. And there's sort of that symbolism of how hungry she is, how she's fighting for survival. I love that we have these kind of translations, new translations of classic literature, because the classic translations are good, but they're classic. And I love when young translators come up with a new version of a story maybe we've seen already in English, but they see it through their eyes and they tell it using the words that they use, and they give the author a fresher voice. And that's why I love this collection. I highly recommend it.
Okie dokie. Triple Go K with the last message saying, another twisted story, Paul.
Yeah.
How do you choose these readings? And do you read them before bedtime? It would make surely for some crazy dreams.
No, I do the Korean literature in the day. My bedtime reading is, I try to stay away from thrillers and horrors. And they're more likely to be a drama, a romance, or an autobiography.
Well, Oh, that sounds lovely, doesn't it? As ever, Paul, thank you for your wonderful reading today.
Thanks to you. Thanks to everyone. Thanks as always to the Literature Translation Institute of Korea with their help for copyright permission for all our broadcasts. And thanks to Kim Tong-in for his compelling story and to Grace Chung for her excellent translation.
Next week's book, we've got a preview?
Yes, we're doing some poetry for the Lunar New Year. It's a morning with only writing left by Park Jang-ho. It's translated by Brother Anthony of Taizé. An Sunjae is his Korean name. So look for that, a morning with only writing left.
Fabulous. Have a wonderful week, Paul. We'll see you next Wednesday.
Thanks. I'm off to go and get myself a potato.
Lovely stuff. You can listen to Check It Out with Paul Matthews on Arirang Radio's #DailyK every Wednesday from 10 a.m. KST.